Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the Premier League check-in podcast with myself, Benjamin Bloom, and the great Matt SB. And maybe there's some people who are going to think we're 6, 7, 8 weeks behind this question. But we last spoke, I think there was a 3-game week and the FA Cup, so the scheduling hasn't worked for us, and a lot of water has passed under the bridge. We're looking at this weekend of fixtures in the relegation sandwich. A lot of people will argue that the coffins are already nailed down for the 3 EFL teams. But when you look at what's going on this weekend, Matt, are we final nailed staple gun, however you seal a coffin, for the relegation sandwich this weekend? Good morning, mate. Can you understand me pitching it that way?
Maybe it's the coffins are going to be welded shut this weekend.
Feels like it.
Yeah, it's getting quite desperate, isn't it, for that bottom 3? Obviously, if we're going through each of them, Southampton have been sort of buried for a while now. Leicester and Ipswich in a very precarious situation where it kind of feels like Wolves are toying with them. It's in their hands, and if they get the next win before those two do, then it's all over. The pace is so slow at the bottom, Ben, so it's really hard to be optimistic and see anything changing. And 6 points now, especially with the goal difference, it's like a 7-point gap down there. So very dire straits.
Are we okay to proceed on the assumption that Wolves are definitely going to beat Southampton at the weekend? How are you sitting on that one? Because the whole part of this conversation is we just don't see a scenario where with Wolves playing Southampton and Ipswich playing Forest, you'd think maybe Ipswich could get a draw at best against Forest and go to 18. But then if Wolves still win, that's then 8 points, which, as you say, is actually 9 points because there's 13 goals in it. Are we okay to proceed on the assumption Wolves go and win at Southampton, even without Cunha?
Yes, obviously they will be strong favourites. I think there's potential for a slip with it being at St Mary's, maybe more so than if it was at Molineux. We've seen Southampton scoring at Anfield. If we're going to try and find positives, they took the lead, but Wolves got to be strong favourites for this. Southampton, if you try and look at it through their perspective, I know we've said that we think they're done, but from where Southampton are, Wolves are the team they need to beat if they've got any hopes of surviving, because they're the team in 17th. So one last dance for Southampton, you could say. They've really got to go for it if there is any fight left in the tank. I know they've still not won in ages. It was obviously the win at Portman Road. We're going back 5 games for that now. But I don't know. I can't really see it, Ben, for Southampton. Maybe if the game's tight, if it's 1-0 to Wolves going into the final 10, Southampton have a chance. And look, obviously for Ipswich, they have to focus on their own games, and if other results fall their way, then great. But you've definitely got one eye on this if you're an Ipswich or Leicester fan, praying that Southampton can get something, because any results for Ipswich or Leicester could be in vain if Wolves just keep bashing out wins. And I'd expect them to this weekend.
So we've kind of peddled the narrative that like Everton and West Ham are good, established Premier League clubs who are kind of having bad seasons, and they're sat there on 33 points. Wolves had a terrible start to the season, and there was the Gary O'Neill issues there, and they've made the change. Fair play, because when you looked at it, particularly with my advantageous Ipswich fan hat on, you're like, oh, is he going to, Vitor Pereira, is he going to come in and is this going to not work and they'll go through 3 managers in the season? That's what you need. So that leaves Wolves, and it's a terrible points total, really. It's 23 points from 28. When you don't factor in the chasms in the Premier League, that means you've just got even more pathetic points totals below them. Because if we were doing this in the EFL, Matt, and someone had 23 points from 28 games, they would be rock bottom of the table, wouldn't they? But they're 14 points ahead of Southampton. If you were to add, let's half the gap. Yeah, let's say Wolves have just been really bad, not utterly terrible, and they're on 28 points instead of 23. That would be an 11-point gap between them and the EFL teams. I know it's a hobby horse of mine and a soapbox of mine, but this is getting ridiculous now. And we've said before, we're going into season 4 now of the 17 teams. And last time I said that, I did get comments saying, "Oh, well, yeah, but Forest survived and Fulham survived." And yes, they did. And there's reasons they have, and credit to them for doing it. But Matt, every year this keeps happening. It gets exponentially worse when you compare double the amount of TV money and 10x the amount of TV money to some of the teams that are going to be coming up and challenging. Sorry, that was a long ramble, but do you take my point generally about Wolves, that if they'd just been bad and not terrible, they'd be a mile clear by now, and that's not healthy.
No, it isn't. It's actually quite sad, really, that the whole of this season, when we've been doing these Premier League check-ins, we're kind of clinging on to the fact that Wolves have underperformed at the start of this season. If they hadn't done that, there's almost nothing to talk about down at the bottom. It would be all done, really. The gap would be too much. Still feels like it's getting worse for that bottom three. Another Wolves win, and they're starting to correct things, and then we're getting back to that conversation that it's all done. We're clinging on to hope, clinging on to whatever there is down here. Wolves draw one game, okay, they didn't win. That's a positive down at the bottom for the bottom three. But the problem is the bottom three haven't picked up many points either. I know we'll touch on Wolves being well under a point per game, but there's just not a lot of pressure on them from the teams below them. There's just not a lot for them to be getting too nervous about. I'm not saying I could tap into what the Wolves fans are thinking right now. Obviously, some of them will be thinking, I want this to be a bit more comfortable than this. But it's really, really depressing, isn't it, when a draw is quite a bit of movement down here, because all these bottom four, especially the bottom three, are moving at such a slow pace, so far under a point per game. We're looking at a record low points total to survive this season. We saw that last season with Forest. I know they had a couple points deducted, but I think when they survived with 33, that was a record. It looks like Wolves could do the same with maybe even 26, Ben. I'm not saying that's what it will be, but it could be that Wolves win one.
They'll get more than that, won't they?
Yeah. But that could be enough, though, in theory, if you look at the three down there, not to rule them all out. But if Wolves win one and lose the rest, they might still be all right. That's quite a sad thing, isn't it?
So, look, I know I've got a big vested interest in Ipswich, and we've done the, massive loads of discussion over on the Blue Monday podcast. But I'm interested in your views as an outsider, as to, is it fair to say, how badly has this gone wrong? I think you've always got to have the caveat in your mind that they were in League One 2 seasons ago, and back-to-back promotions in parachute land is extraordinary anyway. But when you compare Ipswich to Leicester, it's far more stable in respects of Leicester losing their manager and Dewsbury Hall at the start of the season. And, we think they're constantly on the edge of FFP, Leicester, don't we? And, there was didn't get the points deduction in the end, but that seemed like driving through a speed camera and a bird just having to fly in front of it at the right time to block your number plate. You're kind of there by the grace of God. Go I. So you can kind of explain away Leicester having a horrible season and, going on to a third manager in the space of 9 months. But Matt, when Ipswich beat Chelsea at the end of December, and when they were in the lead in the next game against Fulham, were you not thinking Ipswich can win some games between now and the end of the season and get themselves, whether, like if you're saying it's 30, 32, 34, can get up near that? Why have Ipswich just died a death in 2025?
I can't really put my finger on it, Ben, because I agree. A few weeks ago, there was more fight. I mean, there was more fight and more reasons to think this could be interesting. And I know people in the comments have said for a while now it's going to be that 3 that came up that dropped. But I have had a suspicion that Ipswich, they're still in touching distance with Wolves. I like what they've got, the continuity with McKenna. They might do this. They've beaten some of the top teams. What seems to have been the problem is just beating the bottom teams, Ben. It really feels like the Southampton game is one we'll look back on, and you lose that, and it almost feels like you lose the season with it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's taken everything off you in that game. Southampton have pulled you down with them. And with Leicester, I have gone back to this a few times, but I really do think getting rid of Steve Cooper was their sort of turning point. I know Leicester fans that didn't want Steve Cooper there will say, well, we just didn't get the next manager right. It's not that Cooper was the right answer. It's Rude is the wrong answer. But they were harder to beat under Cooper, and they were in games, weren't they? And they snatched things, even if they didn't deserve it. They were in games and they could take something. They look out of their depth under Ruud van Nistelrooy. There's no real fight. There's no goals in them. They concede too many. And yeah, go back to Ipswich, Ben. I'm going to circle that Southampton game as the one. It's weird as well. I mean, you touch on wins. If you go back to the Wolves one, when you won that in the last minute, that really should have been, right, we're here to stay. Do you know what I mean? That is such a big result, or it could have been. Might not be now. The form's really dried up, and there's one game till the international break. Nottingham Forest, we're going to come on to that. Ipswich have to get something, especially with the fixture Wolves have got coming up. Ipswich have to get something.
Yeah, it's brutal to say, and given there's nobody else involved in this, the other sides are 16 points clear in West Ham and Everton, and Ipswich and Leicester are going to be nowhere near them, frankly. It is literally a good week is, did you make a point up on Wolves or not? And a bad week is, did Wolves make points on you? And, even looking back at a sort of 5 games of form, there's 7 points for Wolves and 1 point for Ipswich. There's your 6 points there, Matt, even in recent times. And I mean, maybe it's an okay time to play Forest, or maybe it's a terrible time to play Forest, because obviously they've just beaten Manchester City. But I do think there must be a bit of a FA Cup distraction at some point for Forest, because they could genuinely go and win the trophy, couldn't they? But I think having just beaten Man City, Forest will, because they've got 1 point in 3 before then, they're going to be, oh no, Champions League top 3 is on like Donkey Kong here. And yeah, it's going to be hard for Ipswich to get anything in that one. Leicester have got Man United. Maybe they've got more hope, more hope in that one than Ipswich have, Matt.
Possibly. Starting with Ipswich, Ben. I think there could be something there. Without spoiling my prediction, I'm not sure I will go for Ipswich, but there could be something there. It might not be as dead set as some people might think. I think Nottingham Forest have fluctuated a little bit recently. They had that great 7-0 win against Brighton, but either side of that, they lost 5-0 to Bournemouth and lost 2-1 to Fulham, and they've just beaten Man City. It could be that the next performance is a bit of a dip, and it's away from home. And also, if you look into the 2 games Forest and Ipswich have played this season, they've been really close. Obviously, you lose the league game 1-0. Second one goes to penalties in the FA Cup. I'm not sure how much you can read into the cup one in comparison to league, but and as you say, there's the cup distraction for Forest. Can
I just raise one thing, Matt? One thing tactically. Ipswich at home have been best when Liam Delap can run all over centre backs, and the Forest centre backs are really good.
Yeah, they are. They're just like a brick wall, aren't they? Bricks and cement.
Murillo especially is so good, isn't he? Yeah.
I love it though. I mean, I've loved watching Forest this season. I've heaped loads of praise on them. Low possession, so I assume Ipswich will have quite a lot of the ball. But if the ball goes in, they both head it and kick it away, and it doesn't stay in the box for long. What I mean by Ipswich possibly getting something is maybe 0-0, 1-1. Not saying you can't win. You could snatch it, of course, but Forest have had tight games. They've had really tight games this season. And like I say, against Ipswich, they've been tight games. So got to try and get something over the line here. And you could, with the home advantage, you've really got to try and make Portman Road a fortress. I know the Ipswich fans have done their part this season, but 10 cup finals still to go. I'm repeating the old cliches, but just got to try. Got to try and take it as far as you can.
It's weird, Matt. And I want to say this to you as a Coventry fan who obviously were like millimetres away from promotion a couple of years ago, and in with I know it's a poor result last night, but in with a good shout. Look like they're going to be in the playoffs, bare minimum. Whether they can go and win them or not is different. But there's just this thing as a fan where you say, oh, the Ipswich fans have done their part, and I think it's a bit different than the Leicester and Southampton fans. I think there's a bit more PTSD with those guys. They know the not to downgrade what is a serious thing there, but why I'll use it in inverted commas there. But they've been burned by the Premier League before. Whereas I speak for myself, I feel a bit exhausted by it all. It's like, it feels like, and I don't want to sound all hard done by, but it's so hard for these teams you're going against to fail. And it feels like Wolves have failed spectacularly and they could still be miles clear in the end. And you talk about Portman Road being a fortress. I just wonder whether the Ipswich fans are just going to be exhausted. And if Elanga or Gibbs White or Hudson-Odoi or Wood, all of these greats, sticks one in after 10 minutes, you kind of sit back in your seat and you're like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, it's that. And also, you look at the last game, which we haven't really actually touched on for Ipswich, the Palace game. I didn't follow it, but I'm keeping my eye on the score and I see it's 0-0. I'm thinking as it gets later, that could be a really solid point. One goal right at the end and 80 minutes of focus and hard work, everything slips. You think you put so much into that and you get nothing to show for it. It's such a hard league where one moment will kill you and you could have played really well, could have defended for your lives, but, Palace are a good team and there's plenty of good teams in the Premier League. Forest are a good team. Focus has got to be like that, like 110%, 120% to get something over the line. And even then, you have to follow it up because the reason you're exhausted, Ben, is we're coming here every week. You're probably going on Blue Monday every week. It feels like you're repeating yourself. Oh, nearly, but we lost again. And you have to wait 5 or 6 games to finally get one result to talk about. And then you might lose 3 or 4 again after that. And then you can maybe talk. It's like you have to work 5 games worth just to get 1 point or 3 points. Do you know what I mean? It's really, really hard, this league. And Wolves starting to improve is definitely sapping the confidence away from Ipswich and Leicester fans as well, if there was any left.
There you go. Look, guys, we're trying to.
Sorry, it's really negative, isn't it?
Mate, no, it's not. You're telling the truth. Honestly, we try and Matt and I both pride ourselves on trying to be authentic on here, and there's no hyperbole or opinions for the sake of getting a reaction or whatever. We happen to agree on this. If we didn't, that would be fine. But it is just brutal. Get your thoughts in down there. I know Matt will get plenty of comments saying, final nail in the coffin, Ben. That was weeks ago, but does feel a symbolic one when Wolves get to play against bottom of the, arguably their easiest opponent of the season, according to the league table. Matt, just to round this out, there's some silverware going to be handed out at the weekend. It's the EFL Cup final, and Liverpool are playing Newcastle. I just wondered quickly what your take on that was, mate. Liverpool went all the way. I was like, I did our watch along for EFL and it was like 10:30 and I did the washing up and I put my phone on. Oh, they're still playing and they're gone to penalties at Liverpool. Any chance whatsoever for Newcastle? I think in my lifetime, I've seen them in a couple of Wembley finals and they've just not turned up. And I think a lot of people would love it from a neutral point of view to see that black and white end celebrating. But what's your take? And can Newcastle fans read into Liverpool going they didn't travel, but they went all the way in the Champions League?
Yeah, they did. I watched the ending of it after the Derby Coventry game last night, and Donnarumma gave me PTSD there, Ben. Going back to
he's
England.
The worst, isn't he?
Oh, he's horrible, isn't he?
He fills up all the goal.
He does, yeah. He's like 6'8", I think. Saves a couple of penalties, and Liverpool go out of the Champions League. But because they're so clear at the top of the Premier League, Ben, they can really put everything into this Carabao Cup final. And there's an international break coming, so just absolutely go hell for leather. But yeah, they've played a day later than Newcastle. They've played 120 minutes. It will have taken it out of them. At least they haven't had to travel, I guess. Newcastle played on Monday night. They beat West Ham. I mean, I like both of these clubs. I think they've both got incredible fan bases. So I think the atmosphere will be very special at Wembley. I do like Liverpool a lot, but I won't lie. I'd love to see Newcastle finally win something. Their fans have waited ages for it to happen. And you touched on it. They get to Wembley, but they don't always win. They obviously lost to Manchester United a couple of years ago in the final of this competition. In fact, the day I was born, Ben, 22nd of May, 1999, was the FA Cup final. They lost that
I remember
Man United.
They lost that in like the first 15 minutes. They felt like they were 2-0 down already.
Yeah. I think they lost the League Cup final that year as well, didn't they? Did they lose both finals that year? They might have lost to Arsenal. Not sure.
I don't recall. Yeah. That was the year Man United did the treble, didn't they?
Yes, that's right. But it feels like Newcastle have been to finals. You just can't quite get it over the line. Wembley's not a happy hunting ground. Maybe it will be this time. Final thing I mentioned, though, Ben, missing Anthony Gordon. Obviously, he got a red card against Brighton. Stupid red card in that FA Cup game. I think Liverpool's muscle memory might just take over here and we'll get a maybe painfully predictable 1-0 Liverpool. But would be interesting if Newcastle can lift the silverware.
Yeah, they need Isak to have a good game and score a couple of goals, don't they? That's their route to victory. But yeah, when you're against Salah, who's just been denied a trophy in midweek, I don't know. Wounded Mo Salah isn't who you want to be up against on a big stage like Wembley. But it's going to be great to see. And I think you're right. The fact that they're so clear in the Premier League means, because we have literally seen, I think Liverpool did it themselves, like playing B teams in the EFL Cup final, haven't we? Which is, I think we're going to see a great final, and both sides really ready to win this one. Get your thoughts in on the EFL Cup final this weekend, and could we get a surprise there with a Newcastle win? And that relegation sandwich, and more broadly, what the hell are we going to talk about on this podcast if it does go final nail in the coffin? We'll have to look at some different angles of attack in terms of maybe looking ahead at next season and who's possibly going to be coming in. But there you go. Matt, what is going on over at the wonderful Matt SB YouTube channel?
Well, look out for League One predictions coming out today with Benjamin Bloom. We've just done those. A big game coming up at the top end of the table this weekend. I've also got my Premier League predictions while we're on the Premier League. I got those coming out with Sophie soon. And then I will re-adjourn with Sophie for Championship predictions after all the midweek games have played out. I will be at Coventry versus Sunderland this weekend, so check that out. But thank you for your support on here. And please do make sure you subscribe to Benjamin Bloom while you're watching. And let's blow the likes off this place, Ben. Let's get millions of likes in here. You know me, I like to push for big like targets. We do appreciate it because we put this together just towards the start of this season. And, we're kind of dipping our toes in some unfamiliar territory. And, we really appreciate your support in the Premier League Check-In podcast.
Yeah, and we, to a certain extent, Matt, we kind of need the audience to tell us what works and what doesn't, and what they want to see and what they want to hear. So, we really do appreciate all of your feedback on that. I will keep this one crossed and this one crossed that something unlikely might happen at the weekend. Evidence says it won't, but it's the hope that kills you. And we will join you next week for another Premier League Check-In podcast.